Hello YouTube, and welcome to my very first YouTube video. As it is my first video, you can expect it to suck fairly aggressively in terms of the visuals and sound, but I shall do my best. Okay, this video is going to be about the new Amazon Prime series, The Wheel of Time, based on Robert Jordan's book series of the same name. What I first want to talk about here is what we see in the very initial phases of the series and how it deviates from the book and how these canon deviations actually really matter to the characters in the story. Mostly what I'll be talking about here is just lore, but be warned, there will be some spoilers. Not as far as I know major plot spoilers, but there will be some spoilers. So you have been warned. Okay, so let's jump right into it. What you are about to hear is the first two sentences spoken by Moiraine in the intro sequence of the very first episode of The Wheel of Time.
The world is broken. Many, many years ago, men who were born with great power believed they could cage darkness itself. The arrogance.
Okay, so what's wrong with what Moiraine just said from the point of view of the books and the canon of the books? Well, she describes this as men trying to cage darkness, whatever that means, and they were doing this because they're just so damned arrogant. This is pure just wokery. As we all know, men are evil. They're just all bad, terrible, arrogant people, and that's why they wreck the place, and the poor, long-suffering, angelic women are left to try to pick up the pieces, as is later expressed by Moiraine. Now, this, of course, in the books this is total nonsense. The men and women working together with the One Power accidentally bored a hole into the prison realm dimension that the Dark One is in, and this gave the Dark One access to the world, which the Dark One, because he's the Dark One and he's a very unpleasant chap, he wants to wreck it, and basically he's evil and wants to do all kinds of harm. Now, it was the dragon character who we're going to hear a lot more about, who is the kind of focus of the books, this Dragon Reborn. So this is the Wheel of Time, and in the Wheel of Time, people are routinely sort of reincarnated, I suppose, is the way to look at it. And they're spun back into the pattern, is how the book would describe it. And they are the same people, so that your soul is essentially immortal in that sense. You just keep getting spun out into the pattern. You die, you get spun out again. And your soul is also sexed in the books, as in it's not the case that if you're a man, at least not as far as I recall, if you're a man once, you don't get spun out as a woman. There's one fairly extreme example of this in the books, which is one of the Forsaken who got killed. The Dark One is able to resurrect the people who serve him if he feels it. Well, he can resurrect anybody, presumably, but he resurrects his followers. And he resurrects one of the Forsaken. And the Dark One, being an asshole, he has apparently a bit of a sense of humor. He decides to resurrect this Forsaken, who was essentially a major kind of womanizer when he was alive. He resurrects him as a woman, as a kind of a joke, essentially, which he's not initially very happy about, but he becomes accustomed to it after a while. But the thing about this character is that even though he's reincarnated as a woman, because he is who he is still only able to access the male half of the true source. So he is essentially, in his essence, still male. Now, this is important. It's important for the general mythos of the Wheel of Time, and it's important for the characters, how they act in the world. It's completely central to how the Wheel of Time operates, and how the world operates. And one of the reasons that people are terrified of this Dragon Reborn coming back, even though he is prophesized to save the world, he's also prophesized to break the world in the saving of it. So he's going to, this is let's just say, the mother of all mixed blessings. And one of the reasons that we can presume that this is not certain, this isn't spelled out, but one of the reasons people are worried about this dragon character is that it's going to be a man who can channel. And everyone is terrified of men who can channel, because just like women who can channel, they have access to enormous power, this godlike power that they can access, but they're going to go insane and they're going to wreak havoc all around them before they die. This is why people are afraid of them. It makes perfect sense, and this is also one of the reasons why being told that you are the Dragon Reborn if you're a male it is a death sentence. That's the first thing. You're probably going to go mad, and there's a good chance you're going to kill everybody you care about in the process. So this whole idea that it was just pure arrogance on the part of men is nonsense. The reason men go mad is that when this Lews Therin character, who was the dragon, he gathered together 100 companions, all male, and they were the ones who forced the Dark One. They sealed him back up in his prison. They didn't do a particularly good job on that seal. It's going to weaken eventually, but they sealed him back up again, essentially removing him from the world. And it was as a kind of a backlash to that, as a kind of a counter strike to that, and I suppose as a just a general fu. The Dark One tainted the male half of the power. So we'll talk about the one power in a minute, but it's the fact that the male half and the male half only that's tainted is a hugely important factor in who the dragon is and what the dragon's life is going to be like and what the general world perceives the dragon to be. Okay, a very brief aside on the one power. So this is going to be a quick and dirty breakdown of how the one power is organized. It is the power that was created by the creator of the universe, creator of everything, to power creation, to turn the wheel of time. That's sort of how it's described in the books. It is divided into two halves. Saidin is the male half of the power, which can only be accessed by male channelers, and Saidar is the female half of the one power that can only be accessed by female channelers. The nature of Saidin and Saidar is very different, and this may be, I don't know if it's Jordan's take on men and women in general, the nature of the sexes, but there is some reflection of kind of, I suppose, what you might call the stereotypical nature of the sexes reflected in the power itself. So for women, for example, the power is a fairly peaceful thing. They channel it by essentially cooperating with it. Essentially they have to surrender to the power. So it's seen as like this large placid river is one way that it's imagined, but it has these deadly currents within it. It's powerful but placid, and if you try to fight against the currents, you're going to fail. But if you go with the flow, if you surrender to the flow, you can start to guide it. That's essentially how women access the power. For men, it's almost the exact opposite of that. It's more like a raging torrent. It's not placid at all. Any man who tries to surrender to the power is going to find himself annihilated immediately. It doesn't work that way. For men, it's a constant battle. They have to struggle to control the power, to force it to do what they want. So as I say, this may be Jordan's take on men and women, the nature of men and women generally. I'm not sure, but that's how he has described the two powers. There's no real difference for what men and women can do with the power, but it is divided into 5 different elements. Air, earth, fire, and water, and spirit are the 5 elements. And women are slightly, well, I don't know if it's stronger is the right word. They're better at using air and water than men are, and men are better at using fire and earth than women are. But there's kind of generally equal talent with spirit. Now that said, any man or woman can use all 5. Men are a little bit, actually a reasonable amount stronger in the power than women, in the sense that they have more raw power. They can channel more power. And this difference is, I think in the books they equate it to being roughly equivalent to the physical strength difference between men and women, that it's something on that proportion. There is a sense, I think, that women are slightly defter with the power, that they can create weaves better. They're better at controlling the power in that way. This is typical of Jordan's general world. For every advantage that women have, men have an advantage. Same thing with disadvantages. Women can form links with the power. That means they can link together, combine their strengths. And men can be brought into the links, but men haven't the ability to create links. So without women, there are no links. Women can create links, but only up to 13 women. If they want to add more people, they need at least one man to join the link. It's also the case, for some reason, that if you have 13 women, it doesn't matter how weak they are, they can overwhelm any male channeler, no matter how strong he is. So this linking ability is one that only women have, whereas men have more just sort of raw force, if you like. So that's, again, maybe this is a commentary on the sexes. I don't know. But that's essentially the one power and how it's different for men and women. Now, there's probably a little bit more detail I could go into there on that. There's probably a few more differences, but we're not going to worry about it. That's what's important for now. And what's very important to the narrative of the story, and one of the reasons why the world we find in the Wheel of Times is organized the way that it is, the fact that women essentially rule the whole world, is because the people who rule the world are the people with access to the power, and only women can now safely access the power. And that's because the male half of the power has been tainted by the Dark One. Okay, so back to the Wheel of Time intro in the first episode. Moraine goes on to tell us this.
The man who brought the breaking of the world. And him they named Dragon. Now this man has been born again. We don't know where or to whom, if he was reborn as a girl or a boy.
Okay, so from what was discussed earlier, it should be obvious right now that unless they're completely rewriting the canon of the books, it's enormously important that the dragon has to be a man. And it almost certainly will be in the show. I seriously doubt they're going to make Egwene the Dragon Reborn. I wouldn't actually put it past the woke, but I think it's unlikely that they'll go that far. But it's important. There is no way that the dragon could have been a woman. And if the dragon was a woman, half of the threat of the dragon disappears immediately, because women do not go insane when they access the one power. So in other words, it would be a massive advantage to the world if the dragon was a woman, because it would remove the most dangerous aspect of the dragon being a man. So this is just another example of a stupid addition, idiotic thing added by the woke, because otherwise, I don't know, women will cry because what, they can't be the dragon. It's nonsense. I've never really believed that women are as weak as the woke think they are. I'm pretty sure most women are totally fine with the idea that dragon is a man. It's just wokery being injected, and all it's doing is actually undermining the story. It's adding nothing and actually breaking the canon in a very important and central way. Okay, now the first episode opens with a scene where the Red Aja, who the Ajas are like societies essentially within the Aes Sedai, which is the organization of female channelers. So they're like little subgroups. And the Red Aja task themselves with hunting down men who can channel and gentling them. Gentling them is what it's called when the ability to touch the source is taken away from a man. They call it stilling for women, but it's the same process. They're cut off from the one power forever. So this is what the Red Aja does, and we see the Red Aja chasing such a male channeler. And when they catch up to him, this is what the leader of the group has to say to the channeler.
This power, it's meant for women. And women alone. And when you touch it, you make it filthy.
All right. So from that, you would get the impression, especially if you haven't read the books and you're just watching the show for the first time, you would assume that this power, as she's describing it, so the one power is accessible to both men and women, is the same power. It's only meant for women, and if men touch it, they somehow taint it. This, of course, is, again, from the point of view of the books and the book canon, this is nonsense. They're separate powers. Men cannot in any way, no matter how hard they try, they can't touch the female half of the one power, so they can't taint it in any way. You might be able to, if you're familiar with the sort of the canon of the books, you might be able to maybe interpret it as her meaning that men shouldn't touch it now that it's restricted to women. But for any viewer of this series who isn't familiar with the book canon, they're just going to get the impression that there is only the one power, and that men and women can both access it, but men shouldn't because they're just, they taint it somehow. So the major question here then is, are they completely rewriting the one power and how it functions? As you can see, they're already rewriting how the Wheel of Time spins out souls back into the pattern. It appears that in this Wheel of Time, you could be a man or a woman. It's total chance, and the dragon might be a woman next time, presumably touching the female half the one source. But if they're rewriting that as well, then it's just a woman touching the one power. So it takes away the entire insanity of male challengers. So that makes this entire opening sequence bizarre. It just is men and just what they're just automatically made mad by the way. It just doesn't make any sense. And I don't think that if they're altering the canon of the books where the One Power is concerned to this extent, I just don't think that very many fans are going to be happy with it. But I suppose we shall have to see. Okay, now this video has gone on considerably longer than I had originally thought it would, but as I say, it was a first attempt by me. I hope it wasn't entirely disastrous. I think I'll have to continue this in another part, in another video, where I will discuss maybe some of the other changes that have been made and why I think they also affect the core story and the core character struggles that we see in the first book at least. And I may at some point do just a general review of what I thought of the show in general. Just as I'll try to be as put aside as many of these kind of complaints as possible and just look at it as though I were just seeing a series I knew nothing about for the first time. Okay, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. For the one person who sees this video, thanks for stopping by. And if you're familiar with the material and I have made mistakes, seems almost inevitable, please do throw a comment down there and let me know where I went wrong. It will be much appreciated. So everybody have a fine day.